get energized by your food and your drinks and the networking lunch. So if you are energized, it's time to talk energy. This is the final stage of the program. We're almost to the end, but we still have a couple of fascinating conversations to take. So, without much further ado, let's get this started. And it is my distinct pleasure to introduce to you Bulakh, the founder of Resilience Analytica, that will give a short presentation on energy resilience.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining this event today. So, I would like to talk about the future that is already here. Our goal is peace and prosperity in Ukraine, but what we have to take into account is the context. The context has changed really rapidly. It's coronavirus pandemic, it's Russian military aggression, it's information warfare, it's climate change, and cybersecurity challenges, and now what we're talking about at this panel is energy security crisis. Crisis is an old normal for Ukrainian energy security, and we can see it. But no crisis can be handled without changing the overall approach to security. None of them. What we have now is an ad hoc security planning. It is hierarchical, it is government-centered, and it is uncoordinated. And there are three major players in here: business, government, and society. We need a framework change first, from security planning to resilience building. And something that I've dedicated years working in Estonia, working in Ukraine, the framework. And resilience actually is a strict methodology. It has its path, it has its structure. Resilience, how it works? It's horizontal, it's collaborative, it's protocol-based, and really this is important here, and it's strategic. The goal is not to eliminate the crisis, because we've been talking about myriad of crises here today and yesterday, but the goal is to go through them and to handle them. And what we've done, we applied this methodology and this particular result that I wanted to show you a bit to critical energy infrastructure. So here's an example of electric power supply crisis and how it's managed in Ukraine. There's 5 core stages. It's anticipation, prevention, response, recovery, and debriefing, basically learning lessons. So we are working now only in green one. That's why we have such a plunge. And we are wasting time because we have 4 previous ones. How we're setting up a goal, where we're heading, where we are putting research and development, and it goes down to all the business, government, and society. We are preparing, we are sharing protocols. So this is just to show how many responsibilities and roles and stakeholders we have, and we have to redistribute those roles and responsibilities actually on the preparedness moment, on crisis moment when everything is plunging, and on the recovery moment. And here is a list of specific protocols that we've developed that can be applied exactly to electric power supply ecosystem. But it all eventually comes down to the simple question: will energy security crisis continue to be the old normal in Ukraine? I mean, look to the line. And what's beautiful about resilience application, resilience methodology, that it can be easily applied to medicine, information security, military, cybersecurity, and climate. I saw it really in military and information field applied really beautifully. And eventually, really, our goal in Ukraine is prosperity, but the challenges have never been so severe and so multiple. And the key factor is changing the security framework from security planning to resilience building that is protocol-based and collaborative. Thank you. I kept it short.
That was fantastic and quite comprehensive as well.
Thank you.
So, without much further ado, we move to the energy security panel, and my great pleasure to introduce you, Barbara Wesel, Senior Europe Correspondent at Deutsche Welle. The floor is all yours, and the panel as well.
My speakers. Maybe you want to show slide?
Yeah.
All right. Every moderator will tell you after some experience that the gig after lunch is always the worst. The most difficult, because either you make it really light and funny to wake people up and amuse them, but this is not given to us. So what we'll do is the opposite. We'll make it really hard and horrible. So we're going to talk about the energy crisis at the moment and the future, and of course maybe at the end also what the future could bring and what resilience under those circumstances could possibly mean. So let me introduce the panel. To my left here, Sergiy Makogon, the CEO for the transmission system in Ukraine. So you are the master of the pipes, the pumps, and the storage, right?
On the pumps, storage is...
okay, storage is separate. Okay, but the pipes and the pumps.
Yes.
Right. And then to my right, Marcus Lippold, Green Deal at the European Commission, and particularly the group that sort of is supposed to help Ukraine and support Ukraine. And so a very knowledgeable person, of course, in the field with lots of insights. And then having a relatively hard position here is Bertram from Moltke, from the German embassy, Chargé d'affaires, because of course you'll be presented with the elephant in the room, and we know that the elephant starts with an N and has a 2 at its end. Anyway, let me begin with you, Sergiy. When President Putin just gave a couple of interviews to some international newspapers, and when asked why he wouldn't pump more gas through Ukraine, he said, oh, it's not possible, we can't do this because the system is so rotten, it's so bad, you know, something could blow up at any time, that was the translation. And they didn't invest enough, and so on and so forth. So is that an outright lie, and what was he trying to do there? Tell us about it.
Thank you very much for inviting me to participate in this event. And I think we are right now in the middle of hybrid energy war. And this is part of the war when one of the sides of this war is constantly sending some messages which are not true, which actually create the tensions, the misunderstanding between the partners, between European partners, between Ukraine and European Union. I prepared just one slide for today's presentation, just to show by facts that if we talk about the urbanization of gas, if we talk about using the gas as a hybrid weapon, so right now we are just in the middle of such energy crisis and energy not war but energy crisis. So I would like to start I will just point seven facts for the audience. So, first of all, the exports to Europe are below 2020 level, while demand is still on the level of 2019. So this is the first big chart that you see. Gazprom has increased production by 18%, but it was enough just to triple the supplies to China and Turkey, but not to Europe. We see that actually the Europe supplies are below the level of 2018-2019. Most importantly, despite of all these messages that Ukraine should stay as a transit country and transit should continue through Ukraine, we see a completely different picture right now. Just in 1 year, the volume of transits to Ukraine decreased almost in 2 times. Last December, the volume of transit was about 186 million per day. Right now, the transit is just 85 million per day. And we see that it's kind of the declaration is something declaration, but the facts are completely different. And right now, I would like to emphasize that Gazprom is actually sending less gas to Europe than it could do, because they have booked significantly more capacities through Ukraine. So they have already paid us and booked for daily transit of 109 million cubic meters, but the real transit is only 85. So that's why we see that messages from Putin and from Kremlin are completely different from the real facts. Also, regarding the statement of the president of Russia about our pipelines, I really think it's truly alarming message for us and for me particularly as the CEO of the company, because we are TSO. Definitely incidents may happen, and we know that it happens not just in Ukraine. Several years ago, it was a significant incident in Baumgarten, which hit the flows for Europe for a couple of days. This year, it was about 8 big incidents in Russia, in particular in summer, it was the incident on the Bulakh gas processing plant, which also hit decreased the transit to Europe by almost 50%. So we have this risk of incidents, but when I hear such messages from Mr. Putin, definitely it's quite alarming. Especially when we recall the situation, such, let's call it mysterious incidents which happened before, for example, in Georgia back in 2009 and in Turkmenistan in 2006. What I can say from our side, so there was no incident, technical incident in Europe, in Ukraine, which actually stopped the flow to Europe. There was only two cases when the stop was stopped. It was back in 2006 and back in 2009 when the valve was closed on the Russian side. It was not because of the technical problems of Ukraine. It was the political decision of Russian Federation to close the valves. Even in case of incidents, we have very resilient system. So we have redundant system. We have 4 big pipelines, and we can easily forward the gas to one of those pipelines. So that's why, for the whole history of Ukrainian independence, we never had any problem with the transit because of the technical incidents. And I would like to quote Daniel Freit, which said that, I quote, Putin suggests that incident may befall Ukrainians' gas pipeline. Experience suggests Putin's threats, especially against Ukraine, tend to foreshadow action. Now would be a good time for United States and Germany to caution the Kremlin regarding new aggression. So it was the message from very respected expert in this area. Then the 6th point is that we hear sometimes messages from Kremlin that our route is very expensive, and this is also not true because the cost the Gazprom paying to us, it's about $30 per 1,000 cubic meters. When the price on gas is more than $1,000, so $30 is just less than 3%. So that's why even double decrease in our transmission costs would not make a significant effect on the gas price. And also I would like to remind that President Zelensky just announced that Ukraine is ready to offer additional capacities for the transit with the discount up to 50%. So that's why we also show that we, as Ukraine, are very reliable partner. We are ready to support our European friends in this difficult time, and we are constantly offering additional capacities which actually double the capacity of Nord Stream 2. So right now, in this moment, we have possibility to transit twice time more than the Nord Stream 2 could technically transmit. So this also another statement which is not true. And also, Russian officials continue to claim that Gazprom has increased the supplies to Europe during this year, but it is also not true, because what they actually did, they started to withdraw gas from European storages to show that actually, yes, they fulfill their long-term obligation, but in expense of the storages. And right now, the storages in Europe, especially the storages which are controlled by Gazprom, they are not depleted but not fully full, and this creates a significant risk for Europe, because nobody knows what will be the weather during the winter, and if winter would be harsh, so it could be a significant problem for Europe. And my last point, which actually shows that this is the part of the campaign, is this continuous blackmail from the very top official of Russia, and even the president of Russia said that he showed the explicit link between start of Nord Stream 2 and additional deliveries of gas to Europe. So now I think we have the full picture what is happening right now and who could be the responsible for all this crisis that we have.
So, in normal parlance, we call this blackmail, I mean plain and simple, and that's many international observers agree on that this is a game being played, of course, using different sets of tools, but I would like to pick up on something you said about those incidents, and I would like to involve you, Bertram. I mean, is Berlin well placed to warn the Kremlin about not sabotaging the gas pipes and the sort of transit of gas through Ukraine? Is something like that happening? Is it on the cards?
Well, thank you very much also for inviting me and giving me the chance to be on the hot seat this afternoon.
Sorry about that, but somebody has to.
Somebody has to. Well, Berlin is well placed, I would say, as any other big player would be in order to try to alleviate the consequences of what we see at the moment with the huge price spike with gas, not only in Europe but around the world. We of course do see that the reason for this price hike that we do feel in Germany as well, maybe a bit later than our friends here in Ukraine, but we do feel it now. It's very much in the public debate. But we see the reasons for that partly in Moscow and the Kremlin, but mostly in the international markets, especially the Asian markets, who have even, I understand, higher prices for gas than we do have in this part of the world. Is Berlin well placed to make the Kremlin do what we want them to do? I'm not so sure that anyone is in a good place to make the Kremlin do what they want to do, but what I read in the news today was that Mr. Putin apparently announced that he's prepared to pump more gas to Europe, beginning, I believe, in early November, 8th of November. Of course, he had a little condition attached to that. That's when my own gas storages are filled. So is that the result of someone's intervention? Is that the result of Mr. Putin trying to make good on what he says is the right way? I'm not in a position to answer that.
Yeah, weighing his bets. So it's not quite clear what kind of game is being played, except that we see that Ukraine, of course, is in the middle of it, because you sort of the pawn on the table here. Let me involve you, Marcus. When Ursula von der Leyen was in Ukraine just middle of October, just a couple of weeks ago, and she guaranteed the country that gas transit, which is so important for, of course, the public coffers here in the country, would continue, and that the European Union would protect this. And, I mean, how can we? Is that possible? Can the EU sort of give those guarantees? And in which way will this play out?
I mean, getting the current gas contract, or the gas flow contract that exists now until 2024, established, that involved the European Union. Commissioner Šefčovič at the time played a role as well. So you could think about engaging with Russia in terms of already now sort of clearing the path towards what's after 2024. So there I could certainly see the European Commission playing a role. You would need to sort of re-establish the setup bit that we had back then, which was really energy experts across the region, hammering out that deal. I think that is possible. Interestingly enough, this is now a bit of a sort of crisis situation that we live through. There's also the Moldovan situation right next door. And I get to that a little later, because that's not the question that you posed, but what the Commission is trying to do currently with Ukraine is really work towards long-term and the Green Deal, and making Ukraine and Ukraine's energy system really part of that future. With the intro that we just had, which was very interesting, where we need to go from crisis to sustainability or resilience. That is really what this is about. And given where we are on that path, that would then also give us potential different solutions in terms of what happens after 2024, because in general or more widely we're talking security of supply here. We talk a lot about gas, but in general it's energy security of supply. Energy efficiency is still very much low-hanging fruit in Ukraine. A lot can be done, and that's a huge contributor to more security of energy supplies, because you need less of it, but we can get to that later.
I guess we'll talk about the future a little later. Just let me have one round on the present, because I mean the crisis is now. The winter might be very difficult for you here, for your immediate neighbors. You mentioned Moldova already. And it might be getting more and more tense. You said in an interview, I think recently, that you wanted to be involved in the certification of Nord Stream 2. Would that be a viable path? I would like to ask the two of you, Bertram, you and Marcus, of course, is that something that you could visage to sort of involve Ukraine and their interests in this certification process? Does that make sense? Go ahead, any one of you.
But my understanding is that indeed Ukraine has applied to the German regulator to be participating in the certification process. And my understanding is that this application has been worked on, and I suppose that whenever all the conditions are met, which I couldn't say because I'm not an expert in this, I see no reason why Ukraine could not and should not be participating in the certification process, which is on the way and has been on the way for, I think, since September, if I'm not mistaken.
But this is more than a technical process. This, we don't have to hide it. This is a political process, and it would probably be a political gesture. Now we're like in between governments, so it makes things maybe a bit more difficult.
Well, my understanding is that the certification process is going according to the rules and the regulations and the laws that apply, including, of course, the European Third Energy Package. And I am sure that if the law is been applied, the decision will be made sometime. I'm afraid. I believe in April. This is the time frame that has been that has been set in order to complete the certification. And yes, there is some political element. I couldn't and wouldn't deny that, but in the first instance, it's, I think, the experts who have to work on all the aspects of that process.
So how about the EU side in that context?
They will have a say as well.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, they do.
There's a due process. There's a due process, and one thing after the other.
I mean, like you said, you've got the Bundesnetz the regulator that's currently sort of looking at it. I don't want to speculate, but it might also be an option to have a group of European regulators look at it, so that, I mean, it shouldn't be just maybe dependent on one nation's regulator to make this deal, but I don't know, Polish regulator, other regulators also take a look at it. That might be a way of getting to a consensus in terms of what you do with these gas flows that come from that route.
I fully agree that this is just a process, but we also have to think about another point of view on this. So first of all, like we as Ukraine did all needed homework to keep the trends in Ukraine. So what I mean that we did unbundling according to the all European requirements. So we are fully unbundled TSO, so we don't have any relationship with the Naftogaz, which is the state-owned production and trading company. So we implemented all necessary European network codes, just European energy law is part of our association agreement. So we did everything. We introduced the transparent tariff based on the European tariff network code. So we did everything. And right now for us it's just, we don't understand why another pipeline could be certified under different rules, like ITO model. It means that this company could be the daughter company of Gazprom and stuff like that. So we just don't understand why we have two types of standards. One standard for Ukraine, another standard for the company which belongs to Russia. So that's why we believe this is at least not fair.
Do we have two types of standards or conditions? As I understand, unbundling is asked for Nord Stream 2 too.
That is my understanding as well.
Yeah, I thought so.
And then the President said at the summit that the third energy package will be applied, so in that sense,
So that
there should be
means-
some standards.
So that might
And the
be a
German
worry
government
that would be, yeah, sure, go ahead.
And the German government have indeed said that as well. So I hope, and I'm very confident that there will be no double standards in this case.
Right.
Particularly because it is such a political animal, or elephant, as you call it earlier.
It is a political elephant, sort of created in different times, we must say, and not out of ill will at the time when it was conceived, but the conditions changed largely on the international scene. So same conditions for everyone, so that might be a worry that you don't have. But I would like to sort of ask you further about, you talked about low-hanging fruit in Ukraine, so this is the talk about the future. So what can be done for the future to make the country safer, make its energy supply safer, and make it, as we heard, more resilient. So not as prone to crises as these. Somebody with a lot of ill will sitting in your backyard sort of turns and the flow stops and you're cold. So what can be done, and what's the not short-term answer, but let's say the medium-term answer. Let's not talk about like 20 years, but let's talk about the medium term. What can be done? What should be done?
Maybe it makes sense to go back just a little bit in terms of contexting why we are where we are in terms of the EU Commission. And you might remember that around 2008, global oil prices spiked at around $148 per barrel. So the EU had a huge import bill annually, and at the same time it was clear that some of the fossil resources that we are using, especially oil and gas from the North Sea, was in a heavy decline. At that stage, it was estimated that oil and gas prices would very likely stay high. And I've got a female voiceover, that's very interesting. And so the input bill would stay high and would actually increase because own resources also were depleting. So you had a security of supply issue going forward, and the thinking then was, and this was before climate change really came into the fore, or to the fore. And the thinking was, well, the indigenous energy that we do have is renewable, for example. We then had the climate debate on top of it, and nowadays we've got climate change, energy, and food production basically being three sides of the same triangle, completely interdependent. We then had the Green Deal on the EU side and the Fit for 55 package and the latest sort of Paris agreements. And that is where the Commission is, together with Ukraine, trying to, if you will, make the economy and the energy system fit for the future. More sustainable, less dependent also on fossil fuels. So there is a focused dialogue right now, which was kicked off in February this year between Prime Minister Sergiy and Vice President Timmermans of the Commission. We've since this group, this focused group, which on the Ukrainian side is led by Deputy Prime Minister Stefan Mishina, who is here, and the Director of STUA and Deputy Director General of EMEA, Ms. Karina Martinova on the EU side. And we had a meeting in May. The second one was in September, and topics that we are discussing jointly is the transition away from coal, how to transform the coal regions, energy efficiency measures, because that, like I said, is low-hanging fruit, especially in the building sector, in the residential sector. But we talk about the NDC, the National Determined Contributions, the upgrade that Ukraine has delivered before COP26, which is just about to start. We are talking about industrial alliances on battery production, on materials, and ultimately on hydrogen and green hydrogen. So the plan is to make Ukraine more part of the European or EU supply chain and logistics chain. So if you will, it's all about sort of not offshoring anymore, but nearshoring, getting certain supplies closer to the EU. There's a huge potential in renewables that Ukraine also has. But in order to make this happen and to make it stick, we need laws, and there have been successes in RADA recently. You need good corporate governance, you need an independent judiciary, all things international investors like to put their money here. So we're not there yet, but we are starting, or have started on all of those topics, and so far it's been very good coordination.
Sounds like a lot of marvelous promises, great future, more integration, tying Ukraine closer to the European partners, all this, becoming greener, something everyone wants. Can you implement this? Can you be fast enough, nimble enough? Can the government deliver really on the areas where something that we talked about yesterday, still deficiencies in rule of law and governance and some of those fields? How far are you, how optimistic are you that you can sort of hook into this?
I cannot answer on behalf of the Ukrainian government, so on behalf of our company, the gas transmission operator, we see our future as a partner for transiting the methane as a rich fuel. Of course, we are looking for hydrogen. We already agreed with our neighbors, Slovakia, Czech Republic, and one of the operators in Germany to create the so-called the Central European Hydrogen Corridor to start discussion how we can transit this new type of gases to Europe. But this is, this is our future. But we also have to think how to live, this today, because we have crisis today. And we, from this point of view, for us, for Ukraine, it's very important, I fully agree, to be more energy efficient, because we consume a lot of energy, gas, and comparing to Poland, I think our consumption per unit of produced goods is 2 times higher. So we have a lot of things to do. And if we will be more energy efficient, if we will develop more local production of gas, biomethane, it will help us to be more sustained, more resilient, and more self-sufficient. Because we, as Ukraine, we don't buy gas directly from Russia, starting from 2015. And I think it's helped us a lot to avoid the problems, for example, like Moldova right now. Yes, when they are under significant pressure on renewing the contract. We paid the market price already, and we are not subject to political turmoil, at least in this area. I mean, we are ready to be part of the European green future. We see ourselves as part of Europe, and that's why we are ready to become the reliable partner for any initiatives which will make Europe and Ukraine stronger together.
Bertram, in the recent meetings, political meetings, observers afterwards said what both sides expressed, maybe without naming names, was a certain amount of frustration and also a certain lack of trust in the process on the two sides. So what could be done, and what could Germany, for instance, do to help rebuild this trust and to sort of get a bit closer together? Because you get the impression, in sort of reading up on the latest developments, that the two sides have been sort of sliding apart, to just put it in general terms. So can something be done politically to sort of make this a bit stronger again, make this a bit more urgent, make it politically, put it more on top of the agenda?
Well, trust, especially in the political realm, is more easily and more quickly lost than it is regained again. Once it's gone, it's very difficult to find new avenues in order to build a new set of trust. Me being from a diplomatic service, you would probably guess that my tool would be, well, let's talk, even if we mistrust each other, because if you do not talk, there is no communication at all, and without communication, trust will never come about. Yes, it is about trust, but it is also, I believe, a matter of knowing what one's own interests are. And in the case of Ukraine, we hear and we recognize the aspiration that this country has, and I do also recognize that there is some sort of a crisis everybody is talking about, so I think there must be something to it. Being a European and a fervent friend of the European Union, my sense is that the European Union always has grown and has progressed in times of crisis. So if I translate that to the topic that we are talking about right now is the time to think about the future, which I don't think is the future, it's the present actually. We are in the future when it comes to trying to find the necessary decisions in order to comply with the climate promises that the international community has given to itself and the the nation states that have pledged to reach that. And in this regard, I think it is wise to think how to get out of the fossil fuel economy, which is something that everybody is struggling about, and Germany as well as all other countries. And yes, we are here to help Ukraine also on this field, to get to use the short-term image again, to try to come to an agreement between Gazprom and Naftogaz for a continuation of the transit gas. After 2024, we have appointed Count Waldersee, who has been successful in negotiating the current deal, so he will try to facilitate the continuation. Of course, it's very early to see the results, but I think that is one point, and there are many other measures that Germany has pledged to undertake in order to help Ukraine in this very particular situation. The aim being to help Ukraine to build self-sufficient in the energy sector, to be a producer rather than a transporter, and to detach itself from Russian gas dependency.
So that's the future, certainly. I would like to invite the audience, if you have any questions to our speakers, you're very welcome. But I'll just give you a few minutes to think about that, and I would like to ask you, you talked already about hydrogen and new technologies, new energy, greener energy. So how quickly do you think, and where are you on the way to become a producer? I mean, that is, you said, Bertram, I mean, we're talking about now, we're not talking about 20 years or something, plus time really runs away. So where are you on that voyage?
First of all, we are a transmission company, we do not produce, and for us, as for any logistic company, we need to understand from where to where we need to deliver this gas. We need to understand who will produce, in what amount, and where we should deliver that. So far, we don't see some firm commitments or some firm plans on developing something in the nearest future. But we understand that this future will come very soon, and we already started negotiation with neighboring TSOs, with our partners, because before starting the transportation, we need to harmonize the legislation. We need to harmonize the requirements to the methane content, the hydrogen content. Should it be pure hydrogen or hydrogen mix? If it is mixed, like it's 7% mix or 15% mix. So it's a lot of logistic issues, a lot of legal issues, a lot of the regulatory issues, and right now we are focusing on this because we understand one day the demand and supply will come and we should be ready to react immediately. So we are on the way, but right now more on the way of creating this environment to be able to transit, to transmit the renewable gases.
Anything to be done from the EU side to kickstart this process? You know, if you're getting ready, I mean, understand you're a logistics company, so you move this, whatever it may be, you move it, but still you know the industry, of course, in Ukraine. You know your colleagues,
yes.
So you know what they're working on, you know, and if you say you don't really see anybody right now doing something concrete, then the question would be to you. Can you help kickstart something? Can you put something in?
I mean, there are several things. Certainly in terms of a legislation that clearly specifies, I mean, technical specifications of the product that gets moved, that obviously helps. But you're, I think, quite aware that two energy sources are still being debated differently in Europe. In the EU, one is gas. It's acknowledged that it is a transition fuel, but the question is for how long is the transition? And does blue hydrogen, which has sort of fossil gas as a basis with the carbon sequestrated. Is that acceptable or not? And is green hydrogen also hydrogen which is produced by nuclear energy? So, and that is not clear yet. And that, I think, is also very relevant for Ukraine and how it sets up its energy system. The role exactly that gas and nuclear will play for these future technologies, given that the phase out of coal is basically, I think, acknowledged that that needs to happen. But then you immediately get into, okay, but then how do you produce your electricity and from what? And your green hydrogen, is that all going to come from renewables or not? So that is where I think on those points there needs to be more clarity from the EU. As I understand, the sort of green methodology in terms of where also nuclear sits, that's currently being debated in Parliament. They'll come out with that very soon. So it's all happening right now, it's still early days. But what is good for Ukraine, I think, is that they are already, if you will, part of that discussion. So it is not that there is something that's already been done and it is now you need to adapt to it, but they also see how it is moving, and that I think allows the country also to be more efficient in the sort of energy mix going forward. Because the discussion that we had at EU level now after COVID and the basically economy not going down on its knees but significantly subdued, how do we now quickly come back? Do we just invest in the old assets that we know, which is the quickest recovery, or do we go for future technologies, greener technologies, and thus are already then sort of on the path? So where do we need to put our money? And I think the one advantage that Ukraine has, Olga Stefanishyna said it earlier, that there have been 30 years of underinvestment in general. But that also means the assets that you have in Ukraine, the energy assets to a large extent, they're already written off. You don't need to take a big hit to the balance sheet to write off assets which are still perfectly okay to continue using. So Ukraine is at a point where investments need to be made. And with money going around, but not obviously as much as anybody would like, you need to really decide where you put that money.
So where do you want to put that money? Is there like enough political direction to say we're going here, there, and there? You know. Another question I would like to put in that context is, I mean, some of the Eastern member states are now fighting a rearguard action with regard to coal, particularly Poland. How are you on? What's the discussion like in Ukraine on that? I mean, are you sort of ready to take the jump? I mean, how far are you? And the other question, of course, is where do you want to go? Is there enough political vision to sort of give some steering to this process?
I would like to say that, just as Marcus said, that we also need to consider some geographical differences between countries, because it's very difficult to compare Ukrainian need for gas, for example, with, I don't know, Spain, because we have very severe winters, and gas is the energy we use for heating. It's not the gas for, I don't know, for electricity. So we almost don't use the gas for electricity production. So the majority of electricity is produced from nuclear, and just about 55% and about 30% produced by the coal, and the remaining is renewables. So it's completely different picture comparing, for example, to Poland, when they actually don't use gas for heating because they use coal for heating, and coal for the electricity production, as I know, it's like about 70%. Another situation in Germany, where they use more renewables. Another situation for France, where they use 75% of nuclear. So it's completely different mix. It's very difficult to impose the same kind of requirements for each country, because we cannot change the gas for heating immediately. It will take years, decades, I mean, to change the heating in the apartments, in the private houses. So that's why, yes, we have to look for the future, we have to invest in the future. And from our point of view, I completely disagree that our system is under-invested, so it's invested in the amount necessary to maintain its operations. For example, right now, for me, it's very difficult to make a decision to invest, for example, in construction new compressor station for dedicated for transit, because according to the contract, the transit would stop in 2024. Why should I invest $200 million in the compressor station when it will be idle for forever after 2024? So that's why we insist that we need some long-term contract, additional contract for next 15 years. Then we will be ready to invest. We have money to invest. It's not a problem because money for investments are inside the tariff which Gazprom is paying to us. We don't need extra money. So tariff is enough for maintaining and developing our system. This is the way all European operators operate. So money for the investments are inside the tariff, so it's already included there. So for making investments in new, more modern compressor station with higher efficiency, we just need to have long-term contract. So we invest in maintenance, but right now we are not investing in moving to another level of infrastructure.
Yeah, but how about investing in change? I mean, is Ukraine at that point? Yeah.
And maybe just one point.
Exactly.
In terms of the investments, I think I wasn't talking about the actual transmission system, but developing electricity grid, coal-fired power station, also
Yeah,
other
that's
infrastructure. Well, not your area, which
Okay.
I agree is, yeah.
I mean that I think that if it will be the need and it will be decision, set up by the government, investments will come because this is the way it works. Now the government invests a lot in the infrastructure, the roads, bridges. Next step will be the energy modernization of the houses and factories in order to reduce the consumption. Then we should go to the new type of the heating, but
Yeah, but how quickly are you ready to do that? I mean, this is, it sounds like someday in the future, like maybe 2030 or something, we'll talk about heating systems for houses, which basically is something that needs to be done like next year and the year after that, really, really quickly. Is that doable? I mean,
yes, it's doable, but we should think if it is reasonable. As I said, so we use gas for heating. We produce a lot of gas locally, yeah? So we need to understand what would be another fuel, how we can get, how much it will cost. So we need to understand all this supply chain. For me personally, I think that gas for Ukraine, especially for the heating, would be in need for the next decades because it's just not possible to change it.
that doesn't sound very future-oriented, does it?
Well, I think a lot of what you just posed as a question is going on right now, because since Ukraine delivered the updated NDC, there's now work ongoing in terms of okay, but how do you actually now really implement it? So there's sector analysis going on. There is a economic development strategy for 2030, long-term low emission strategy, all of which is being done right now. Most of that I think is going to be ready first quarter next year, and then we know more. So there's modeling initiatives going on. People are really getting serious about this because there have been certain numbers put on how much the green transition apparently costs, and that is now being, if you will, verified. So maybe it's a little early. What didn't go that well for me is the way renewables was kickstarted, where investors still haven't been paid, and this has literally brought a foreign investment in that area to a standstill. So that needs to be fixed quickly because it needs foreign investment in Ukraine to really make this happen. But for that, again, you need all the legal security, independent courts, and so forth. all of which is going on in parallel. So I would say the potential is there, but to really have the country perform at its potential, there are still things that need to be done. But again, a lot of the strategy things, the modeling in terms of what you need to achieve by 2030 to be then carbon neutral by 2060, all of that is being done right now.
So we have a certain element of the cat chasing its tail. You know, if you talk about, you know, we have the courts problem, we have the rule of law problem, we have, of course, corruption problems, we have all these things that sort of keep development stuck like in a rut.
There aren't any quick fixes.
There are no quick fixes, which is always sounds discouraging. Bertram, I would like to bring you in here. Germany has relatively, within the European context, a high part of renewables. Could we do something to help? Could we engage more with transforming industries? Could we sort of maybe reach out and say, okay, we try and give you a hand. We don't wait till the international machinery moves, but we try to sort of help you on the way a bit. Is that a possible initiative?
I could answer with, yes, we can.
It's doing your part for me.
Yes, indeed. I think Germany has entered into this phase where we are transforming our energy sector quite considerably, and at the same time, we are going we are building on the renewable. We are getting out of coal and we are getting out of the nuclear, which puts a lot of pressure on the renewables. So that may be also a case of a cat chasing its own tail. But what I'm trying to bring to the fore is, even though it may be difficult, even though it is something where we will still have to develop solutions to the issues that will arise from this energy transformation, at least there is a vision, there's a clear path, there's a clear date. And this is exactly what also Sergiy needs for his company, a clear vision of where to go, when, and all that. And I attended a similar conference last week in Kiev that was also about gas. And what I understood is that the vision here is to extend the nuclear field in the energy mix. That's one. And coal, yes, there is some sort of a vision, but 2060 seems to be more likely the date that the coal phase out would be. So there seems to be something emanating from that. I can speak for Germany. If it is for coal and nuclear energy that has been generated in this country and been sold in Germany, I am not sure that this is the right strategy to follow, because as of 2035 or 40, gas will be in very little demand, as will hydrogen produced with nuclear power. So this is also that's why that's what I meant when I said the future is not tomorrow, it is today. It is decisions that are necessarily difficult, that have to be elaborated and found and then put into practice, which indeed will take some time and which indeed will have some bridge energy, which gas is and will continue for some years, but there is an end date to fossil energy.
So you'll be phasing yourself out more or less without yet having a clear plan for the future, Marcus?
Well, there's two things, and you mentioned the coal mix in Poland, for example. One thing is that the carbon price in Europe has now gone beyond 65 euros per ton. So that creates a certain reality in terms of where people invest. The smaller elephant that keeps on appearing slowly at the horizon here also in Ukraine is the carbon border adjustment mechanism. So the carbon content in the products that the EU imports. And the more Ukraine's energy system will be geared towards sustainability, resilience, and green, if you will, the less of a challenge it will be. If the current energy mix remains and nuclear will definitely not be accepted by the EU, then that will be a challenge for Ukraine in the future because the EU is by now the biggest trading partner.
So basically we have to acknowledge that you are somewhat in a difficult position. I mean, you're fighting right now, this winter and for the next years, about keeping the status quo alive. And at the same time, you would have to take a jump and you don't know yet where you're jumping to. So how about in your circles, the discussion about this, where is it going? I mean, is it going at all? I mean, are you and your colleagues talking about this? And what's the thrust really of those discussions? Are people's eyes open to it?
Yes, I mean that we are in discussion, so we are talking about it, and for us that's why we are very we don't understand. Sorry, I have to return to Nord Stream 2. So that's why we
Thought I had killed that up.
Yeah. So I fully agree that the gas methane it's a transit fuel and actually it will disappear one day. So that's why we don't understand why somebody needs additional route if there is plenty of routes available, like Ukraine, Poland, so enough routes to and with additional lifetime available just to continue using what we already have. Why somebody needs to invest billions of dollars to build new pipelines if these pipelines could be actually if this money could be invested in other areas. So that's why yes, we don't understand, and my understanding is in Europe they also don't understand, what they are kind of going to. Because why to build new infrastructure if it will disappear? So if the gas is not in the interest of Europe, so why we have these tensions right now? Regarding Ukraine, yes, we see our future. So we will substitute the methane with biomethane. Potentially, we can substitute the methane with the synthetic methane developed from the renewables. So we'll add the hydrogen to our methane and we'll transit it as a part of the transit. So we are ready for discussion, and we really would like to be, the part of this discussion. So we're ready to offer a lot of interesting things to Europe, particularly in the transit of gas, also in storage of gas, because Ukraine possesses the biggest storages on the continent. So we can help a lot Europe with, in particular, such situation as it is today. When the storages could be used to store the strategic stock of gas or something like that. In the future, it could be used for methane storage or any other thing. So we are ready to be part of this global discussion about the development of the new market in Europe.
Another chance to put a question. Anybody in the audience? Yes, please, go ahead.
One, two, yeah. No, it's okay. Thank you. Ilya Pusin, Ukrainian Institute for the Future. I have actually two short questions, separate ones for two speakers. First one is for Mr. Moltke. How far could Germany go against Russia in terms of gas? When we reach a point where we understand that Russia uses gas as a weapon, as was declared in the German-American statement on Nord Stream 2 in July. So, because 2 days ago, U.S. Special Advisor on Global Energy Security, Amos Hochstein, said that Russia is close to using gas as a weapon. So, are there any specific red lines which for Russia and for sanctions to be applied and maybe other coercive measures? And the second question is for Mr. Makogon. In the German-American statement on Nord Stream 2 in July, it stipulated that a special fund will be created to support Ukraine energy sector. And I believe different countries the countries pledged up to 1 billion euro to support Ukraine. And actually, I referred here to my colleagues in Ukraine that they say that, it may be not enough. So could you estimate basically how much money does Ukraine need to modernize our energy infrastructure, for example, to participate in the green transition projects that were mentioned in the discussion, and to live to the goals that you have talked about? Thank you very much.
Go first. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I'll go ahead. Yes, indeed. Using energy as a weapon is one element of the joint statement by Germany and the US that you mentioned. And I did also read Mr. Hofstein's comments. I am not privy to the information that the qualification as to what is a weapon with regard to energy has been stipulated. I understand that it is under discussion how to clearly define and to see when the threshold has been reached. So far, obviously, Mr. Hofstein thinks it's close, but has not been reached yet. So bear with me when I cannot really give you the answer that you are expecting of me. And with regard, maybe I can speak to that as well. With regard to that green fund for Ukraine that Germany has pledged together with our American friends to set up, that also is technically being developed as we speak. We understand that I understand that there has been thorough interest from other institutions to come in and to participate in this fund. I'm pretty sure that $1 billion for all of us sitting here privately seem to be a lot of money, but with regards to what is at stake, it seems to be too little. But here again, I mean, this is a pledge that Germany has undertaken, and I have absolutely no doubt that also the future government in Berlin will comply and will deliver on the pledges.
Sergey.
Over to you.
Thank you. Regarding this fund, so I fully agree that definitely it is not enough if we talk about the full modernization, the full rebuilding of the Ukrainian energy sector. I consider this like if we make the parallel with the startup business, so this is kind of angel investment. Just give something to startup and maybe additional investments will follow. Because I believe that we need much more funds in order to fully rebuild the system. But it should be based on the commercial reasoning, on some economic benefits for the participants. So I believe it should be funded not directly from the fund, but it should be like commercial investments.
Yeah, always we come talking about commercial investments, we're always sort of coming back to the same point that some reassurance from the Ukrainian side seems to be missing about how to push forward reforms, the necessary reforms to give the government more credence in that context. So, what is your assessment on that point, Marcus?
Well, there have been successes rather recently. I mean, the law of energy efficiency has been adopted. I mean, it took 5 years. Fine, so it's, again, you need to stay the course, you need to be there, but if you do, I think things do happen. We've had several laws being adopted in terms of land reform. There has been the inland waterways laws. There are things that are moving forward. Sometimes It is 2 steps ahead, one back, and not one sideways. But I think, I mean, the Commission certainly, and Germany as well, it's a serious commitment, and we are here as partners for the long term. The next step for me personally is really look at what needs to be done by 2030, and that will be sectoral plans or strategies, and if they are being taken up, then things really do change.
Is there a further question on this thorny and difficult, yes please, issue? Microphone is right, thank you very much.
My name is Olga Belkova and I work with Sergiy to define the clear future of Ukrainian TSO, as you were pointing out. So my question will go to you. We read very carefully all the statements made by the government, and we find it very difficult for ourselves to understand the reality right now. Chancellor Merkel specified that natural gas will be used for decarbonization in Germany, and we totally understand that. In our country, as Sergiy mentioned, natural gas is reality for the next 20 years. Yet we get offer to replace natural gas with hydrogen, which our economy doesn't need right now. And when I ask your colleagues from the government, why don't they use Nord Stream 2 for hydrogen? I get strict no. Can you please explain why not? If you need so much green hydrogen, why don't you bring it from that direction?
I thought you were against Nord Stream, and now you're suggesting us to not only transport natural gas but hydrogen as well. I am not a gas expert, so I am unable to really give you detailed information on this particular thing. My take is, if Ukraine wants to be part of the Western European energy grid, energy sector, energy market, and the rest of it, it is, in my view, a good idea to have a vision or elaborate a vision today on how to achieve that in the long run, given the fact that things are going particular ways in Western Europe. When Germany says this is the way we want to go, because we are having we define very clear climate goals for ourselves, and we're going in this direction. Of course, we need to develop other ways in order to satisfy the energy needs. That's a very simple issue. And here, Ukraine, as I see it, does have a very large potential for generating and being a producer of green energy. And this includes, of course, the hydrogen sector. And we've been talking about white elephants in the room. I may perhaps talk about a dream that I have. I have a dream that one day there will be a Ukrainian, German, and European consortium of entrepreneurs deciding to develop and produce green hydrogen being transported to my country and the rest of Europe, and then perhaps the elephant is not needed anymore.
That's amazing.
Well, I'm not sure whether it will die that quickly, but at least that would be one thing.
Okay, Bertram had a dream. I would take this as your last words because our time is up, but I'll give, of course, the two of you the chance to have a little dream, very short little dream of your own. So, Marcus, what would be your dream?
To come up with really good sectoral plans, how to move forward starting early next year or with next year towards 2030, making it stick with the necessary legislation that is still missing.
That was a marvelous, well-defined, snappy dream. Sergey, how about you?
My dream is a short-term dream.
Come on!
My dream is the gas is not used as part of the political vehicle. My dream is that Ukraine transit gas not just for Gazprom but for many other shippers like from Russia, they have plenty of that, from the Central Asia. My dream is that I'm spending time on upgrading our system, injecting hydrogen to the system, not talking about some alternative routes and other things. My dream is that European countries are receiving as much gas as they want at the reasonable price.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you. And we say thank you to the audience, of course, for listening. And so I give the floor back to Bruno.
Thank you very
Next
much.
round.
Thank you
It
very much,
seems.
Barbara.